to create a mask effect. At the moment, all I'm doing is drawing a wiggly line across the picture to show you the theory. I'm cutting a hole through the top layer into the bottom layer. So you can now see two parts of images. The top image of a girl called Becky, which was a model shot from Kevin Wilson that we use, and this wiggly line, which is the tin wall sitting behind this picture. And best described actually over in the layers palette, where we now have a layer mask with the wiggly line represented as a black mark, a black wiggly line inside that white box. We've created something called a layer mask. What that white box tells me is that I've cut a hole through the top layer into the bottom layer to reveal the bottom layer, and that black mark is the hole. Okay, now that's a terrible mask. I want to do something more accurate, but the masking brush is nice, but using it with a mouse it's very difficult to control exactly where it's going. So let's just undo that particular stroke using Command or Control Z on my Mac or my PC. Notice that the brush consists of two concentric circles. Why two? Well, it's a soft-edged brush. It's not hard, okay? If I had a hard-edged brush, so I reduced the feather, for instance, to 0, it would be a very chunky, very clean-edged brush. But I like to work with soft-edged brushes because I like to make sure that I get a nice fit for any masks or any processes that I'm doing. So I'm going to increase the feather to the brush. I think it was at about 25, using the little slider at the top. There's my brush. So two concentric circles. The inner circle is the solid brush. The outer circle is the edge of the anti-alias or softened pixels. Okay. Now, there's also a little minus sign inside the brush. What's that doing there? Well, this is crucial for the next step of the process, because I'm going to increase the size of the brush and I'm going to move up to where it says Perfect Brush, top of the workspace, and I'm going to click in the little box there, and I'll just pause while it happens for you. There it is. Click. Now, as long as I keep that minus sign in the area that I want to mask, look what happens. I think this is magic. It's not really magic, it's just clever technology. What's happening is that the brush is using an edge detection algorithm to decide where new colours are that it does not want to affect with this process. So for instance, everywhere I mask now, it's an effective little masking process. I'm not using perfect mask in this case, but I'm using a tool that's doing a pretty good job, and it's doing it nice and fast. Look how it masks up to the edges of these leaves. As long as that minus sign avoids the leaf, then I'm going to get a nice mask right up to the... I think this is gorgeous, by the way. It's a beautiful tool to use. What I'm doing is just selectively revealing this tin corrugated iron barn wall, or whatever it is. It looks like a barn to me. I didn't shoot this picture, so I don't know. The picture, by the way, is supplied free of charge by onOne software, which is nice. I don't have every picture under the sun that I will ever want to use. I tend to shoot mostly landscapes. I don't go around shooting barns. And actually, in England, it's very difficult to find a barn that's made up out of corrugated iron. This must be Oregon, which is where onOne software comes from. I'm just thinking, it looks American to me. I can imagine a guy in a Stetson chewing tobacco and ready to go out on the range and get some cattle herded up, or whatever cowboys do. And let's just click on a few more things here. This is great. Now, the whole reason I'm doing this, I'm not in Perfect Effects at the moment, but the whole reason I'm showing you how this little brush works is just to get you into the idea of this careful selection process, painting in a specific area of an image, and if you make a mistake, just changing the mode up in the top left-hand corner of the workspace, just changing the mode from paint out, painting out the background, to paint in, reducing the size of the brush somewhat, and just clicking back in Becky's hair to fill in the bits that we might have inadvertently taken out. It's not deadly precise, okay? But it's really not too bad. Now, with that done, I'm just going to do a little extra effect here. I'm going to go to the Layers palette, right-hand side of the screen, click on the layer that I want to work on, and just say Copy. It goes a lighter grey when you start to want to manipulate a particular layer. Look, I've made a copy of that layer. And I'm going to go to the blending mode and say multiply, which basically doubles up the pixel depth, if you like, of those particular pixels. And I'm going to add another copy. And now with multiply selected, it's an automatic process of automatically darkening down, doubling, trebling, quadrupling the pixel depth so that it goes nice and dark, so that my wall becomes a more natural color, assuming that it's in the shade of these leaves. Okay. Now, that's great, and I'll finish there. I don't want to carry on with this image, because what I do want to do is close this, not save it, and now go into Perfect Effects. But bear that brush process in mind, because it is going to work in other places. I want to go to my little browser, my demo images, and actually I'm going to find, if I find my demo images, let's just see what we've got here. Yeah, I've got a file here called France. I went on holiday to France this year, and I'm going to use this image, which is called Cognac Door. It's a door in Cognac in France. Okay, so it's the place where cognac comes from, so I love it. It's great. Cognac's beautiful, isn't it? Better not have one yet. It's only 10:34 in the morning. Okay, so there's my image. Now what I want to do with this picture is to, well, apply some effects. So I'm going to take the image as it stands straight into Perfect Effects. So a single click from Perfect Layers. You don't need to double click. A single click takes you into Perfect Effects. Remember, the format is, we have a browser on the left-hand side. You will have fewer volumes in your free version than I have. And then over on the right-hand side, you have your little navigator window, just like in Perfect Layers, for instance. You have your effect stack. Think of it as layers. The top layer, in fact, is called empty layer before an effect is applied into it. I can add and delete, expand, and I have various options for my layers in there. I can adjust the amount. And down here, I have effect options. The effect options in the full version are a powerful feature set that enable you to edit any of the editable presets that we've given you. Okay, now this particular door is nice. I don't think that's such a bad picture, but it's a bit flat, it's a bit dull, isn't it? Let's do something to make it a little more exciting and interesting. The first thing I'm going to do is to go down to a range or a volume of presets called HDR, High Dynamic Range. If you're not familiar with it, go onto Google and Google it and figure out what HDR is. It's actually taking several exposures of one subject and then applying different levels of those exposures into the image to tone map it, to get the best possible tints and tones in the image. The tone mapping process is quite complicated. So what we've done is to put together a series of high dynamic range simulators. The image will look as though it's been shot in a very precise and careful way, despite the fact that actually I'd had 3 cognacs walking down the street in different bars, took this shot and then fell over. Okay, well, not really, but that's the sort of thing you could have done. Let's try an HDR look with a single click. Beautiful. I just think that effect, and I'm just checking that it's happened. There it is. It's happened on your machines now as well. I think that looks twice as nice. It looks as though I was absolutely sober when I took the shot. It looks as though I'm not about to fall over. Everything is pin sharp and precise in that image. A single click from one of these effects can create an effect that you want to use. And away you go. You say apply back into Photoshop and you've got the look and the feel for the image that you want. I want to go a step further. I want to show you a few other things here. So remember, HDR look now appears in the top layer. I can adjust the amount of the effect if I want to. Let's try a couple more. Look at this. Another HDR look. This is a subtle HDR look. It's actually pretty similar to the last one, but I'm going to keep experimenting. Another one. Ooh, that's HDR looks surreal. This is a powerful series of effects that we've put together to simulate a slightly overcooked HDR look. Now, some people love this look. Other people think, ooh, it's starting to look unnatural. It looks a little bit like a kind of painterly effect, and that's not always your cup of tea. But this surreal look is a powerful HDR look. This is where the amount slider might come in sensibly to just reduce the amount a little bit. Not back to the level of a standard HDR look, okay? Let's try tonal contrast. This is another HDR look where we've enhanced the contrast for you. But it's not quite as powerful. I love that HDR look. I think that looks absolutely beautiful. Now, what if we wanted to apply the effect into a small part of the image? What if I didn't want to apply that HDR look into the whole picture? Okay, we'll use the brush. Let's go to the top of the tool palette on the left-hand side. By the way, if you want to close the browser down on the left-hand side of the screen, just move down to the little arrow and click. Okay, I'll wait till I'm there. So there's a little bit of a delay sometimes on the webinar, so I don't like to push ahead, otherwise I lose you. Okay, that's great. By the way, if I want to close down the navigator window, I can, again with a single click. It just makes the workspace a lot bigger. Now, it doesn't mean much for this particular image because this image is in a portrait format. If this was a landscape, then I might want to use the whole screen. I'm going to keep the navigator window on board. In fact, I'll just put the browser on. Let's put the navigator window in place. So we've got that there, so I can check my layers as I work. Now, use the brush. Now, the brush is a masking brush, very similar to the masking brush in Perfect Layers, which is why I want to use it. Note, there is a Perfect Brush option on the top of the workspace inside of your Perfect Effects Free and my Perfect Effects for Full. What does the masking brush do? Well, let's just try it. Let's try it in an area, for instance, across that little face motif at the top of the door, and I'm just going to look on my screen to make sure that that's happened for you. By the way, the movement on my screen is quite smooth. The movement on the webinar that you're seeing is a little bit jumpy. It takes away that tone, okay? That HDR look, okay? Now go over to the right hand side again and you can see a layer mask. The layer mask is created with that black hole through the white box and the top layer, meaning that I've cut a hole through that top layer into the original image. And that's what the masking brush is doing. The problem is it's not very selective, it's not very precise. That's where we come back to the perfect brush option. So do you get it now? We spent a lot of time looking at the leaves on that raw file of Becky, and it was really for this. I just wanted to get you prepped, understanding the idea of the perfect brush option. Let's use it. When I do the Perfect Photo Suite in a couple of hours, actually it's at 2 p.m, I'm going to be using the perfect brush option for retouching a couple of fairly complex images, in black and white even. So it's probably worth having a look at those as well, just to get the gist of how this is working. Now, first of all, what I'm going to do is I want to paint this effect in to the areas of the image that I want to affect most with this HDR preset. Okay. Now, to do that, I don't want to paint out the effect. I want to invert the whole layer, and if I invert it, it switches off the effect, so the picture will go soft again like the original. Is it soft yet? Yes, it is. Now, when I use my brush, check that the mode is set to paint in, not paint out, and when I paint in, it paints the HDR effect into my picture. You'll see it changing in the little pediment at the top of the here you go, beautiful. And the edges should be precisely in line with the little plus sign now. The plus sign has changed from a minus sign in the original brush to a plus sign. So the HDR effect is being limited to the area that I cover with the brush. Oh, I just slipped out of it there. Did you notice? I actually went out. So I'm going to just, and I'll actually paint back in that little area. Let's just set this right and then get it, paint it out. So we put the effect, the softness back into the stonework there. By the way, if you use the X key on your keyboard, you'll see that the little icon in the brush is changing to plus to minus without me even taking the cursor up to the panel. So it's just taking away or adding the effect in as I work. Okay, so just experiment with it, get it absolutely right. Look at the door now, the sharpness of the door in the middle of the screen is coming out beautifully, and I'm painting this all in. So it's really just enabling me to accurately, using the perfect brush option, which is edge detecting, remember, so it's not going beyond the edges of the current colors that it's painting into. The edge detection. Wow, beautiful. Oh, the edges are lovely. I love that the stonework just really leaps out of the image as you use this HDR effect. By the way, there are lots of other effects that you've got in your free version. You won't have as many HDR effects as me. That's because I've paid money for my software, and I think it's worth every penny anyway. But in your free version, you will have some sharpening tools, which are nice as well. So beautiful to use, and you get some fantastic sharpness. I'll find some other effects that are just gobsmackingly wonderful. Now that's a British phrase. Okay, so let's just get this done. Oh, I'll do a little bit of the step. I'd like to see the steps, perhaps the second step down as well. You can vary, by the way, the opacity of the brush. It doesn't need to paint at 100%. Move it back to about 60 to 70, so it's not quite such a fierce effect all in one go. Some areas of the image you probably don't want to be as HDR'd as the others, but isn't that nice? Okay, now I'm going to apply that effect back into my Photoshop, back into my elements, back into my aperture or my Lightroom, or in my case, back into my perfect layers working standalone. Yes, I have Photoshop on my machine, I have Lightroom, I have aperture, but I'm using the suite as you would use it, first of all, in standalone mode with your Perfect Effects free. You won't have, by the way, the mask, portrait, black and white, focus or resize across the top of your screen, top right hand corner of my workspace. What you'll have is layers and effects. It might say effects free. Isn't that funny? I can't remember what it says now. Okay, beautiful. I'm impressed with that door. So impressed. I'd like to do it all again. Anyway, let's try a different kind of effect. Let's go to an interior shot. I'm just going to say new, and I'm not going to save that file. And I've got an interior now of a little gallery in Versailles. I always like pictures, interior shots with sunlight coming through windows. It looks fantastic. It was really difficult this day actually to find a picture where there were no people in the image staring out of the windows and making faces at one another, because Versailles was so popular. Fantastic. Last went there 30 years ago, so it's been 30 years since I did Versailles. Absolutely gorgeous. Now, inside of effects, of course, I'm going to switch my browser back on the left-hand side so I can find that. And I'll use the double column mode, and I'll probably do a little bit of sharpening on this one. So let me just go here and do a little bit of sharpening for you. I get 4 lovely sharpeners. I'll view them in single column mode so that I can see a little bit more. High pass sharpen, mid-tone sharpen. By the way, if you want to see these effects slightly bigger but you don't want to apply them to the picture, just go up to view. And in view you'll be able to come down and say show browser pop-up. And when you click on the show browser pop-up, look what happens. High pass sharpen, mid-tone sharpen, what does that look like? I get an enhanced preview. So I can see what it's going to do to my image before I apply it. Let's say a high pass sharpen. for this particular image, and it's a subtle sharpening process. It's not made a huge amount of difference. In fact, if I use the amount slider, yeah, it's really subtle. And you know, sometimes subtle or a very sensitive adjustment to an image is good. And in this case, I'm happy with the way that looks. So much so that I want to apply another effect over the top. How do we do that? Well, look, you're not limited to a single effect. Even in your free version, you can build up as many different effects as you want. So just go through the 70 odd effects that you've got and see what's there. Then say add. Underneath the effects stack, a little add button will create a new empty layer. Okay? So I've still got my high pass sharpen. Remember, it's a subtle sharpening routine. Let's try and find another one that will look interesting as well. How about amazing detail? Just a little bit too much. So I don't like that effect. But with that top stack or layer still selected, I'm going to go into, what should we go into? I know what we'll go into. Let's go into color correction. I'd like this picture to look a little bit, I'm going to switch, by the way, the show browser pop-up off because I don't like those big lumps of effect appearing as I work. I'm going to make the image a little bit warmer. And I'm just going to check down here and find a warming process. So I have amazing detail. The image looks reasonably warm. I'd just like it a little bit warmer. It was a very, very hot day outside, and I don't think this particular... Let's try warm highlights. Single click. Oh, it has. It's actually... It's picked out the highlights in the image, and it's just made them a little bit warmer, but not warm enough. Let's go to warmer. Here. Click. Whoa! Now the picture's gone terribly warm. In fact, it's too warm. I'll just wait for it to change for you because it takes a few seconds sometimes just to process the image. It looks a lot warmer. So I'm going to reduce the amount of that warming down. And I'm going to reduce it to actually quite a lot. I'm going to bring it down to about 20%. A 20% extra warming is just giving a little bit more to my picture. Remember, subtlety can be a really important thing. Now, I quite like that look. I quite like the effect. It's quite subtle. It's not too ridiculous. It's the sort of thing that I would want to use in my work. But I'd like to use this effect again. I just don't want to have to go through the process of saying, now what was the preset? It was warmer. Well, what was the setting I made for it? Was it 50% or 60% or 20%? I can't remember. And I also had a high pass sharpen in there, a little sharpening routine. Okay, let's save it. Let's save the preset. Go to preset at the top of the screen and then say save preset. Now, I've created some folders of presets that I've created over time, and one of them is in a category called Bob Versailles. So I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. I'll use the same effect again. But my preset name is going to be Gallery Interior. I wish I could type. Sunlight. So shafts of sunlight coming through there. The creator is Bob. And the description is hot day inside the Long Gallery. I'm not even sure if there is a place called the Long Gallery in Versailles, but there you go. And I'm going to say create Gallery Interior Sunlight in Bob Versailles. Creating that preset keeps warmer, high pass sharpen. It keeps all the information that I've input into this particular picture. And when I go to my presets and then Bob Versailles, Gallery Interior Sunlight is there. Okay. Now, just to test that it actually does something to the image, let's delete warmer in the layers palette and delete high pass sharpen and go back into Gallery Sunlight with a single click, apply it. Yeah, it's just sharpened it slightly and it's warmed the image. And that's beautiful. That's exactly what I wanted to do. So I've saved the settings that I had for that 5 minutes worth of work as a preset, and it's now there for me to use. And I've got lots of different ones. Cognac architecture. I did several, in fact, for that door. So look, there's a beautiful grungy vignette type one there. Let's try that on this image. Ooh, that looks spooky. It looks very dark. It looks quite old. Ooh, Versailles in the French Revolution. Who knows? Let's try grungy vignette Bob Cognac. These are all my effects. You can save your own presets even in your free edition of Perfect Effects. How amazing is that? I think it's fantastic. Anyway, I've just got more choice in my full effects version. Now, what are these funny little flags that sit next in the browser? Look, on the thumbnails that we've got, I've got little flags. I can see those in triple column mode, 2-column mode, however we want to see them. Well, I can save these as favorites. Now, I got all excited and overheated about this particular effect called Warm Texture Booster Grunge. It's one that I've saved in the past. Well, as well as saving it in my presets, let's put it into favorites. Just click on the little flag, and when you go into favorites, you'll find it, and it's going to be, there it is, Warm Texture Booster Grunge. Just click on the little flags at any time in any of the presets that you really, some of the presets with the best will in the world, you're not going to use as much. You probably won't select them as favorites. You probably won't use them as a basis to start to build your own presets. But I do. I tend to use all of them because a lot of thought has gone into the way these have been created. So I've got lots of different HDR looks, lots of different types of effects in here, just saved in my own favorite sets. Okay, so beautiful. Some of the effects, if I just delete that top layer, so we end up with an empty layer back to the original picture, some of the effects are actually brush-based effects. So if I go into basic brushes here, and I'm going to actually view them in single column mode so you can see them just a little bit bigger. I'm even going to make the browser space a little bit bigger, so everything gets bigger. Notice something about these presets. They're called basic brushes, and I think you have a couple of basic brushes in your free edition. There's a little brush, top left-hand corner. So let's see what happens when I click on it to apply it into my empty layer. A new layer appears and it says brush cooler, but the image hasn't changed. Why? Because it requires a brush to make it work. Okay, so I won't use the perfect brush option this time with the brush selected as it is, and it's big and it's feathery because I've just enlarged it for you using the bracket keys on my keyboard. I can change my brush size up here. Again, remember, paint in, paint out. There it is. It's almost turning the image into a monochrome look, which looks brilliant. But I don't know. It's actually quite nice. This. I can see. Hang on. This is going to become a favourite pretty fast. Actually, I have a real use for this. So I'm going to click this as a favourite, so it appears in my favourites selection, and that's nice. Change the mode to paint in, and you reverse the process, okay? So you can reverse the idea of what you're doing with your image that way. So brush cooler, nice, brush-based effect. Be careful, because you might get frustrated if you think, well, I've clicked on that and Bob said that's how you... Well, if it's got that little brush in the top left-hand corner, nothing's going to happen until you select your masking brush and you start to work, okay? So just invert the image to paint the effect in, or reset the image as you work. So, great little program. I think Perfect Effects Free is fantastic. Now,